So this is YouTube, not WordPress. So it's understandable that people want, prefer things in a video format, right? So what I'll do is read and explain a bit from the stuff that I've written, which is on this page here that you see on the screen. The URL is down below in the description of the video. It's victicara.com/tropical. So there you can see the table of contents, right? Let's start off with this first bit, Surya Siddhanta. So Surya Siddhanta says, Bhachakra nabhav vishuvat dvitiyam samasutragam ayanam dvitiyan chaiva chatasra pratitastuta. The two solstices and two equinoxes are the thread upon which the core of the zodiac exists. This is a definition of a tropical zodiac. This does not compete with any other definition of the zodiac. This is the only place where the zodiac is defined. So this is the definition of the zodiac, and it's saying that you need to know the Vishuvat and the Ayana. The Vishuvat's the equinox, and the Ayana is the solstice. There are two Vishuvats and two Ayanas, two solstices and two equinoxes. And if you draw a line between those two pairs, you get a cross. You have two solstices, two equinoxes. You draw a line between the two, you get this grand cross. And the zodiac hinges upon, or is anchored upon, those diameters, that grand cross. So two solstices and two equinoxes are the thread upon which the core of the zodiac exists. Tad atreshu sankranti dvitiyam puna. Two borders are between each point. So you have this diameter between the two solstices and this diameter between the two Vishuvats or equinoxes. And then there's Sankranti dvitiyam. Each section has two Sankrantis. Sankrantis are borders, changes. So this gives you three divisions within each of the four quarters established by these two diameters. That's why you have a zodiac with 12 divisions, because what you're doing is taking two equinoxes, two solstices, and dividing the space in between them twice. So 3 in between each space. 3 times 4 gives you 12. Bhachakrana bhavashuvad dvitiyam samasutragam ayanam dvitiyan chaiva chatasra pratitastuta tad atresh sankranti dvitiyam puna bhanur makara sankranti shanma sutrayanam karkadeshtu tatavasyat shanmasha dakshinayana. That's going to explain that the sun takes 6 months to reach the northern solstice after entering Makara, Capricorn. So to go from this Ayana to this Ayana, it's going to cross 6 Sankrantis. If you take this thing and you divide it, you put 2 divisions in between each one, and you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, until it gets from the bottom to the top. So Bhanu, the sun, goes from Makara Sankranti, the entrance of Capricorn Makara, and then it takes 6 months to pass the 6 divisions, rising up Uttarayana to the highest Ayana, to the upper solstice. Then from that spot, which is Karka Adeshtu, which marks the beginning of Karka or Cancer, it takes 6 months to cross those 6 borders to get down to Dakshinayana, which is the lower solstice. Then it says, finally, guess what? Mesha adyo dvadasaite masastar eva vatsara. So it says the zodiac signs which are named Aries and so forth, Mesha and so forth, Aries, Taurus, etc. The 12 of those, dvadasaita, are the masa, the months of the vatsara. So the zodiac wheel is the sun's orbit, apparent orbit, and the divisions of the wheel are the months, the 12 months of the year. The reason why there's 12 months in the year is because there's 12 divisions established by the 4 cardinal points being subdivided twice. You get it? You got any questions about that, if anybody's watching? Any questions, let me know. I wonder if my microphone is at a good spot. No questions? Questions on topic, of course. All right, we'll proceed. So the next thing that's on this page that I'm reading for you is Bhagavat Purana. Bhagavat Purana is the key Purana, and every Purana has 10 main subjects, one of which is astronomy. So this is not a non-astronomical text, and astronomy is not a non-astrological thing, because astrology is the interpretation of the impact of astronomy. So what does Bhagavat Purana say about Zodiac? This is the only place, again, in Bhagavat Purana where the Zodiac is defined. It's not competing with another definition of the Zodiac. This one says, the sun moves at varying speed between the northern solstice, southern solstice, and the equinoctial points. So again, it's saying you have 4 important points. The 2 Vishuvats and the 2 Ayanas. You see, the same words are used. Saesha Udgayana, Dakshinayana, and Vaishuvata. The Vishuvats and the Ayanas. There's 2 of each one. And the sun moving through those 4 points is what creates the division of the year. And the division of the year is how you know the nature of the sun at that particular time, or the nature of the planets occupying that point in space. So the sun moves at varying speeds between the northern solstice, southern solstice, and equinoctial points. Its rise towards the northern solstice, and its fall towards the southern solstice, and its crossing the middle point can be known by observing the local time. Now this is being spoken to Indian audience. So it's going to observe the time according to how it would be seen in India. It says, but the principle is the same globally. It says, Makaradishu Rashishu Aho Ratrani Dirga Rishva Samanani Vidadate. The days and nights grow longer and shorter, revealing which of the signs, Capricorn, etc., the sun is in. That's basically how you know where the divisions of the zodiac are. Because these are not visible things, as you'll see when we get to the part about, when we get to the quote from Parashara or shastra, which is next on the page. See, it's down here, the next one. It's not amongst the zodiac is not amongst the things which are visible phenomena in the sky. They're not amongst the points of light that are in the sky. The zodiacs are divisions of the sky itself, as are the houses. But the houses are based on 4 cardinal points created by the Earth's horizon. The zodiac is based on 4 cardinal points created by the Earth's equator. So the way that you can tell where the sun is by how long the day or the night is, how much light or darkness there is over the course of a day. And then the way you can tell the position of any planet is by its angular distance from the sun. So if you know that the sun is at the beginning of Aries and that some other planet like Venus is 45 degrees away from it, 45 degrees more progressed, then you know that it's in Taurus, that Venus is in Taurus. This is how the calculations are made. You may think this is not astrology, but this is because you don't calculate charts anymore. Astronomy is the part of astrology that allows you to calculate a chart. So if you're going to believe people who say that astronomy is not important for astrology, then you're going to actually believe that you don't need to calculate a chart in order to interpret it. So in that case, you would be better off just reading a crystal ball. All right? So the way that you can tell where the divisions of the zodiac is are to tell how long or short the days and nights are. You're going to see nights being long or nights being short or days and nights being equal as indicators that the sun is at the lower solstice, upper solstice, or middle solstice. And this is local time for the northern hemisphere. If you're in southern hemisphere, it's just flip the solstices. just to know the borders, not to know the character of the signs. Just to know the borders of the physical location, astronomical location of where they are. So here he explains that further. He says, Yada mesha tulayor vartate tadaho ratrani samani bhavati. When the sun is in Aries and Libra, the days and nights are equal. When the sun enters Aries and Libra, the days and nights are equal. When the day and the night is equal, you measure the day and the night. Just like you have to have telescopes, you have to have clocks in order to do astronomy. You measure the day and the night. When they're equal, you know that you've at a Vishuvat. The sun is at the Vishuvat. And then by knowing where the sun is, you can know the position of anything else in the sky by just measuring its angle from the sun. Then he says, when the sun is in the 5 signs starting from Taurus, the days grow longer, the nights grow shorter month by month. And when the sun is in the 5 signs starting from Scorpio, the days and nights change in the opposite way. This is how the zodiac is defined and explained in the Puranas. This same definition is given in Vishnu Purana and Padma Purana. And there's not another definition given in any other Purana. This is the only definition given of the zodiac. So this isn't competing with somebody else's definition. Like nowhere has it been defined that Chitra Yogatara is the beginning of Libra. That has not been said anywhere in any Purana or in any astronomy text. Perhaps in modern books, but not in any classics. Any questions up to this? If it's a clock, what is that? 12. 12. What is 12 on the clock? What does 12 represent? The beginning? Then that would be the beginning of Aries. Well, we got everybody here. For my surprise, I just got done with my other work early, so I figured I'd throw this in today. So now the third thing that I have on this wonderful page, victorcara.com/tropical, which has any info you want to know. People are like, but this, and all I have to say is just go read victorcara.com/tropical, but they won't. That's why I'm doing the video, because it's YouTube, so you would like to see a video about it rather than have to actually read. So let's go see what's on, coming from Brihat Parashara or shastra. This actually got included here because people somehow claim that Brihat Parashara or shastra defines the sidereal zodiac, which it does not. There's no definition of a sidereal zodiac in Brihat Parashara or shastra. The closest thing to a definition of a zodiac at all is here in chapter 3, 2-5. And it is not sidereal. So here is what it is. He says, Shrinu Vipra Pravakshami Bhagrahanam Prishtitam. Listen, scholar, I will explain the position of the stars and the planets. Akashe yani drishyanti jyotir bimban yanekasha. So Parashara says, look in the sky. Akashi, look in the sky. What do you see there? What do you drishya? You see jyoti, you see lights. You see jyoti bimba, you see little dots of light, right? Look in the sky and you see dots of light. Even if it's daytime and you look in the sky, you see a big dot of light. It's the sun. So everything in the sky is a jyoti bimba. It's a bubble or a dot of light. And how many of them are there? Aneka, infinite, uncountable, uninnumerable. There's many, many, many dots of light in the sky. So listen, scholar, I'm going to explain the Bhagrahanam Prishtam, how the stars and planets are situated, how the sky is situated, understood. Look up at the sky, see all those dots of light? Those are important. Then he says, Teshu, amongst those dots of light, Nakshatra Sangyani, Graha Sangyani, Kanichit. Kanichit, some of those dots are known as Samgyani, Nakshatra, and others are known as Graha. So the dots of light in the sky fall into 2 categories. Some are stars and some are planets. The word graha refers to planets. The word nakshatra refers to stars. The Rashi have not been mentioned. He used two important terms, nakshatras and grahas. He didn't say Rashi Sangyani. Kanichit. He didn't say some of these dots are the Rashis. So he has not said that the Rashis are stellar, or that you see the Rashis as stars in the sky. He said that you can see the nakshatras, the stars themselves, or the fields based on the stars. And he said that you can see the planets. Now he's going to explain the difference between a nakshatra and a planet. Here, the word nakshatra is being used to refer to the stars. Tani nakshatra namani sthirasthanani yani vai. Those dots of light that stay put, sthirasthana, the ones that keep their relationship to each other constant, they stay still. Those are called nakshatra. Kshatra means they move, they change. Nakshatra means they don't change. So the ones that don't change are called nakshatra. Those are the dots of light in the sky that stay, they're fixed, the fixed points. Those are the fixed stars. The constellations, those are the nakshatras. Those are not the Rashis, but those are the nakshatras. Why am I saying they're not the Rashis? Because he's going to mention the Rashis later. Tani nakshatra namani tirasthanani yani vai. Gachanto bhani grillanti sadatam yetute graha. But, different from, every time you see the word but, it means different from the thing before. Or inconsequential or unrelated to the thing before. Even in English, that's the way we use the word but. In Sanskrit, the word is tu. So he says, but the planets are not those things that stay still. The planets have grillanti. They move and they have grilla, which means they have some volition. They seem to have volition because they gacha. They're not tied or fixed into space. They seem to have freedom. Because they gacha, they move. So the stars that move, we will call them the ones, the movers, the ones that seem to have will. So those are called graha. So he's explained why the term graha is used. He actually has explained why the term nakshatra is moved. Nakshatra means, why is the term nakshatra used for stars and constellations? Because it means doesn't move. Kshatra means change, and na means not. Nakshatra means the dots that don't change. Graha is used because these are the dots of light in the sky that have grilla, which means volition, because they gacha, they move. They're not slaved or tied or chained together. So they have independence and will, so they're called graha. They have grilla, which means will. So those which always move as if they had will and consciousness are called planets. This is the same definition that you will find in any culture, any classical astrological culture. The planets are the wandering stars. That was the thing I learned in like 4th grade astronomy in elementary school when they were talking about how the Greeks looked at the sky. It's the same thing here. So listen, scholar, I will explain the positions of the stars and planets. In the sky, we see many dots of light. Some of them are known as stars, and others are known as planets. Those which stay fixed in their places are called stars, but those which always move as if they had will and consciousness are called planets. Pachakrasra nagashvangsha ashvinyadi samavya. So now he's saying the nakshatras, they form a chakra. They form this constant kind of wheel of a shape because they form constellations, and that forms a shape that you can see moving, rotating like a wheel. So it's called a Ba Chakra, a circle of stars, or a celestial wheel. Ba Chakrasya Nagashvini Amsha. It has Amsha. An amsha is an integral portion, like a navamsha, dashamsha, dwadashamsha. It's a part of something which doesn't have a separate existence from something else. Like, it's not exactly the truth, but like your arm is sort of like an amsha of your body. If you cut it off, then it dies. It ceases to exist. So an amsha is a part of something, but it cannot exist separately from the thing. Just like a navamsha does not exist. It's a part of the zodiac. It's not a separate area of space. It's a part of the zodiac. So now he's saying that the circle of the constellations has its amshas, its portions. And those portions are named Ashvini and so forth. You know them. You know those ones. Ashvini, Bharani, etc. Samavaya. And the wheel is turning, and the reason why he uses Ashvini first, even though classically Vedics used the Kritika first, is it's like a wheel. The circle of stars is like a wheel turning by a horse. Like the animals, you can tie an animal to a wheel and make the animal will walk, but it will wind up walking in a circle, and move the wheel, and it will make your bread. It will change your grains into flour. So he says it's like that. Okay, so far so good, right? Now he says tad, which means that same bachakra, that same celestial wheel, can be divided dvadasha vibhagas, 2. But besides this way of dividing the things, that same wheel, that same space, can be divided into 12, not 27, but 12. And those are known as Tulya, Mesha, Adi, Sangyaka. Why would he mention Tulya and Mesha? Why would he mention Tulya and Mesha? Why not say Meshadi? It's Libra and Aries, the 2 equinoctial points. Tulya also means equal. Tulya means equal. It means equal. Why is Libra called Tulya? Because it's the place where the days and the nights are equal. When the sun gets to Libra, the day and night is equal. The Bhagavatam just explained that. The Surya Siddhanta just explained it. Hence, it is named the equal. But it also, the way that he puts together the wording here, it means that it's similar. So the way of dividing the sky into 12 divisions is similar to the way of dividing the sky into 27, but not the same. 2, but it's not the same. So do you see what the Parashara or shastra is saying? The Parashara or shastra is saying, look, if you want to know what the sky is all about, there's 3 important things that you understand. The Rashis, which is the zodiac signs, the Nakshatras, which are the lunar divisions of the sky, and the planets that move through those spaces. When you look up at the sky, the first thing you see is dots of light. The ones that don't move, that stay in their position, those are called Nakshatras, the non-movers. And the ones that do move, those are the planets, the movers. Then there's something else that you don't see. That's a way of dividing the sky into 12 portions by Tulya and Aries, by Tulya and Mesha, by Libra and Aries, in other words, by the equinoxes. So, although this is not a very clear definition of the zodiac, because the Parashara or shastra is not an astronomical text, it is an astrological text. What's the difference between astronomy and astrology? Astrology is the interpretation of the astronomy. Astronomy is what allows you to calculate the chart, and astrology is what allows you to interpret the chart. So the Parashara or shastra is a book that is dedicated to the interpretation of the chart, not the calculation of the chart. The Surya Siddhanta is the mechanics and the mathematics that allows you to calculate a chart. And the Puranas also give that astronomical information about how you would calculate the charts. Any questions? Oh, so what he's saying here, although the Parashara shastra is not giving a very clear definition of what the zodiac is, what he is clearly saying is it's not stars. This is crystal clear. That it's not nakshatras. The rashis and the nakshatras are two different things. The nakshatras are star-based, aka sidereal. The Latin word for star is sidereal. So the nakshatras are sidereal. The tropical thing, the rashis are something else. They're based on Mesha and Tulia, the equinoxes, aka tropical. The Greeks called equinoxes the tropics, or the waypoints, the turning points in the sun's orbit. Do you understand? Does it make sense? Do you have any questions? That's great, Vrajadama. Use Ayanamsha, which means no Ayanamsha. And use whatever Ayanamsha you want for your nakshatras. Might as well just pick a basic one. I can't understand some of your questions or statements, but those I can understand, I'll try to respond to. What about the nodes? Are they retrograde? They are retrograde and invisible, and do they physically exist? They don't physically exist. They are not actual things. They are the places where the moon and sun cross. That's the nodes of the sun and moon. There's nodes of other planets as well. All right, so then let me just finish up. I'm going to read you one more thing today. The fourth part on this page is this new thing here. Don't believe the newbie foreigners. This page, by the way, is victorcara.com/tropical. I'll do some other ones in the future, reading the rest of these things to you, going over it with you. But now let's just look at this one. Don't believe the newbie foreigners, because this is the new thing lately. Upon hearing someone say the sidereal zodiac is a mistake, the initial reflexive reaction from most of the users of the sidereal zodiac is understandably quite defensive. It's understandable, right? If you come up in the chat and you say, "Yo, Vic, you made a big mistake," I'm probably gonna reflexively have a little defensive attitude in how I respond to it. Hopefully not too defensive, so that you can convince me if it's actually wrong. But it's just a natural way that people react to being corrected. So there's nothing crazy about that. It's understandable that there would be a defensive reaction. But what's not understandable is to cherish the defensive reaction and nourish it with half-baked arguments. So the largest community of people using the sidereal zodiac signs is, of course, the community of Indian Vedic astrologers. So actually speaking, it's almost the entirety of the sidereal zodiac is Indian. It's just recently there's a subset in the Vedic, in the non-Indian world, because of Cyril Fagan, who a small portion of those people also got interested in sidereal zodiac signs. So basically, if you say the sidereal zodiac is a mistake, then what you're doing is being perceived as an insult to Indian astrology. And the Indian astrological community will be the one that has this defensive reaction to you. And what I wouldn't really have expected this, but the way that it actually works is that their initial knee-jerk reaction is, who's this white guy telling us about, our tradition. This is our tradition, they say. Who does this foreigner think he is? Some newbie, claiming to be more important than all our own experts for hundreds of years. I wouldn't have made up this quote by myself, because I wouldn't really think this way. Maybe I would. But I didn't make this up. This is what people say. So please allow me a moment to address this reaction. So here's my request. I request you to temporarily forget that I, Victikara, exist at all. Let's forget about me. Let's instead consider who else besides me. Actually, you know what I'd really like is just forget about me and just think about the content that I'm saying. Forget about the speaker. Also, this was the thing that we learned in 7th grade, if you paid any attention at school. It was how to have a logical argument with somebody. Not an emotional argument, but a logical argument. And the one thing that you avoid is something called ad hominem, which is where the argument becomes about the person rather than the statement, rather than the claim. Like if Darwin says XYZ and then somebody says, well, Darwin was such an asshole. Darwin was just a fool. Then that's called ad hominem. There's no actual significant content in that argument about Darwin. We don't care if Darwin is cool or not cool, or we don't care about Darwin. We care about what he said. So that would be the greatest thing, is if people would not give a damn who I am, just care about the information that I'm presenting. But since it is not entirely unwarranted to care about the qualifications of the person presenting the information, let's move it to this request. I request you to temporarily forget that I, Victikara, exist at all. Let us instead consider who else, besides me, has also declared that the Zodiac, even the Zodiac of India, is intrinsically tropical and not sidereal. Actually, it should say the Zodiac of India, because if you want to declare who said that the Zodiac is tropical, it's everybody. But how about the community that is using the sidereal Zodiac? Who else has said that that community shouldn't be doing it? So first, we have the Vedas themselves, which used astrology to determine the correct time to perform important and sacred endeavors, yajna. Mostly they relied on the 27 sidereal nakshatras. But whenever they utilized a 12-fold division, they did so in relation to solstice and equinox. In other words, they utilized only the tropical 12-fold division. They utilized sidereal 27 divisions. So the Vedas themselves, if you look at how the altars are constructed, if you look at when the performance is supposed to be performed, it's in relation to solstices and equinoxes and the two divisions in between each one. Or else the ritual or the ceremony or the endeavor has nothing to do with anything solar, and it's timed by nakshatra positions. So the first entity that is claiming that the Zodiac is tropical besides me is the Vedas, which is a bit of an indigenous Indian source. Next, we have the astronomical sections of the Puranas, which we just read, along with the astronomical and astrological classics like Surya Siddhanta, which we just read, and Brihat Parashara or Shastra. These are the Indian classics. As shown above, these unequivocally and uniformly define the zodiac as a solstice equinox phenomenon, i.e. tropical. Now, this being the case, we would expect at least several more contemporary Indian thinkers to question the adoption of the sidereal zodiac. So maybe this is totally wrong. I mean, if this is true that the Vedas, the Puranas, the Surya Siddhanta, and the Brihat Parashara or Shastra say that the zodiac signs are not stars, they're there are divisions between the solstices and equinoxes, then why isn't anybody questioning the use of the zodiac in a sidereal or stellar manner? Why is it only this foreigner or these foreigners? So let's examine that. Let's examine the claim that it's only these foreigners, these weirdos. So are there any other people besides these white guys? Yes, many. I can only mention those that I know of. So first of all, let's go back to classical astrologers. Varaha Mihira. You don't get more of a Vedic hero than Varaha Mihira or Aryabhatta. There's not more of a hero of astronomy and mathematics in India than Aryabhatta. So Varaha Mihira and Aryabhatta spoke in favor of a tropical zodiac. Aryabhatta did so in the first statement of the 4th chapter of his book Aryabhatiya, and Varaha Mihira did so in Brihat Samhita and Panchasiddhantaka, where he noted that the solstices are the markers for the beginning of Cancer and Capricorn, just like the things we just read. And that these drift through the nakshatras over time, but the tradition that was developing around him was ignoring this in favor of just keeping things the same. So you have Varaha Mihira and Aryabhatta being very early voices in the Indian tradition saying, is this really what we should be doing? Now, that's from a long time ago. This is 14th century. It would be easier to look at more modern people because it's more clear to know what they were talking about. We have better records of who they are and what they talked about. So let's move into the 19th century. In the late 19th century, S.B. Dikshita, in his book, History of Indian Astronomy. This is not a clueless person. This is not a person from somebody else's tradition. He's the author of the book History of Indian Astronomy. In the part 2 of that book, he concluded that the Indian calendar should be based on the tropical zodiac signs, not sidereal, because of the importance of the solstices and equinoxes in Vedic religion. Like I said, the Vedas themselves use the solstices and equinoxes and the markers in between them to time many of the significant ceremonial events. Why many and not all? Because the rest of them are timed by nakshatras, sidereal nakshatras. Nothing is timed by a sidereal zodiac sign. So somebody will say, well, that's for a calendar. But you just read Mesha Dyo Dvadashate Masas Stareva Vatsara. There's no difference between a calendar and a zodiac. The zodiac is the calendar, and the calendar is the zodiac, because the orbit of the sun around the earth is the year, and the divisions of the orbit of the sun around the earth are the divisions of the zodiac, and are the months. So Mesha Adyo, Aries and so forth, are exactly the same as the 12 months. According to the Indian classics of astronomy, Surya Siddhanta, which is on the screen right now in black and white. You don't have to believe anybody else. So in the late 19th century, S.B. Dikshita in his book. So take this out of your head that when they're talking about a calendar, they're talking about something else. It's not astrology. It's only because we don't even remember what the roots of astrology are. The roots of astrology is to tell the time, because by knowing the time, you know the present, the past, and the future. Because the past, present, and future are 3 phases of time. You can't do divination and prognostication and prediction without a calendar, without a chart. The chart is a fancy calendar for an individual. What is your birth chart? Your birth chart is a fancy karmic calendar tailored to you as the individual. A calendar is a generic birth chart for time itself. They're both using the same systems, nakshatras. The nakshatras are part of the Indian calendar too. It doesn't mean that they're not part of your birth chart. The nakshatras and the zodiac and the movement of the planets through the nakshatras and the zodiac defines the progress of time. It is therefore used to make calendars, and it is therefore used to make individual calendars, aka birth charts. So check this out. In the late 19th century, S.B. Dixit, in his book, The History of Indian Astronomy, Part 2, concluded that the Indian calendar should be based on the tropical zodiac signs. This is at the late 19th century. Not sidereal because of the importance of the solstices and equinoxes in Vedic religion. Dikshita, however, recognized the unlikeliness of conservative Indian culture to adopt such a radical change, and suggested that a partial reform would be to standardize a singular sidereal zodiac on the Chitra-Paksha Ayanamsha. So he said the truth is, it should be based on solstices and equinoxes because the zodiac is based on solstices and equinoxes. But they will not, the Indian public will not accept such a radical change. So let's at least stop having 15 different Ayanamshas and just ratify one Ayanamsha. That was his recommendation in the late 19th century. Dikshita's opinion was echoed exactly by the official calendar reform committee led by who? N.C. Lahiri. You may have heard Lahiri's name before because the most popular Ayanamsha for establishing what the sidereal zodiac is called the Lahiri Ayanamsha. Because of this calendar reform committee. So you can't even say, no, this is about calendars. We don't use this in zodiacs. The calendar is the zodiac. The calendar reform committee led by N.C. Lahiri establishes the way that 90% of the Indian community calculates the zodiac in your birth chart. Dikshit's opinion was echoed exactly by... So this is the truth about this calendar reform committee. Really, they just plagiarized S.B. Dikshit, who was a couple of decades or a decade or two before them. I don't know, plagiarized, but they just took his opinion exactly. They just decided that Dikshit's opinion was exactly correct. So what they said was the first and second resolution in their official report to the Indian government in 1950 of what calendar should be ratified for India as a country. The first and second resolution in that committee's report was that the start of the year, which is synonymous with the start of the zodiac, should be marked by the northerly equinox. But they conceded that an Ayanamsha can be applied for religious purposes as, quote, as a concession to the prevailing customs. So the use of the Ayanamsha to determine tropical things like zodiac signs and beginnings and middles and endings of the year, and the beginnings and middles and the waypoints in the sun's orbit around the earth, the Ayanamsha is used as a concession to the population who refuses to change. Not because it's right. The Ayanamsha recommended by Lahiri is not the Ayanamsha recommended by Lahiri. It's the Ayanamsha recommended to placate the Indian public. The truth is that it should be based on the solstices. That's what they said. It's not a foreigner saying it. It's the Indian government's committee. Again, on page 7 of that report, while elaborating on the standardization of the religious calendar, the committee wrote, quote, this recommendation, Chitra-Paksha Ayanamsha, is to be regarded only as a measure of compromise, so that we avoid a violent break with established custom. But it does not make our present seasons in the various months as they were in the days of Varahamihira and Kalidasa. It is hoped that at not a distant date, further reforms for locating the lunar and solar festivals in the seasons in which they were originally observed will be adopted. They hoped that somebody would come along soon to make further progress, moving the Indian concept of zodiac and year into what it actually was, into what it actually should be, and what it was at the time of the originals, Varahamihira Kalidas. They wanted people like us. It is clear that the 7 extremely highly esteemed scientists and scholars commissioned in this committee agreed that the tropical zodiac was correct, but a sidereal zodiac would be required to accommodate the prevailing customs. You get it? Nothing could be more clear than this. Thus, they viewed the sidereal zodiac as a compromise with tradition. In 1930, which was before this, G.V. Krishnaswamy published a paper entitled Reform of the Indian Calendars, in which he said the method of placing the ayanas and the months, the months are based on the ayanas, the months are identical to the 12 divisions of the zodiac, the months of placing them on a sidereal basis in the Indian calendars is defective. And hence there is a difference of about 23 days in the calculations, 23 degrees. The sun moves 1 degree each day. That's in 1930 from G.V. Krishnaswamy. In more modern times, at least 3 scholars, Krishan Kaul, M.K.A. Patrakam, and T.V. Shivaraman, speak very openly against the sidereal zodiac. And now here's 3 more. Leaders of mutts. Mutts are big temples or religious communities, spiritual communities. Sri Swarupananda Saraswati Maharaj of Dwarka Mutt, stands behind them, these 3 scholars who speak against the sidereal zodiac, adding that the Dwarka Mutt has promoted the very same idea for 120 years. 120 years is not a newbie thing. Nor is the Dwarka Mutt something foreign. Sri Jayendra Saraswati Swamigal of Kanchi Mutt also supports them, saying, the time has come, quote, for this reform. Sri Ganga Dharendra Saraswati Swamiji of Sri Sonda Swarnavali Mutt also supports them, saying, all must, quote, fall in line with the Sayana system. Sayana means tropical. So I'm not the only one who's like kind of militant. Sri Gangadharendra, that's Shiva. Gangadharendra Saraswati Swamiji of Sonda Swarnavali Mutt says you better fall in line with the tropical system. What do we conclude from all this? Simply, even if you want to embrace the don't believe the newbie foreigner's reaction to this, you still must deal with the actual facts. That the indigenous Indians for dozens of centuries, going back to Varahami here, or at least for dozens of decades, going back to the Dwarka Mutt, have been trying to challenge the popular sidereal tradition. And even the committee of the Indian national government, which established the sidereal tradition, or standardized the sidereal tradition, did so explicitly saying this is just a concession, it should actually be tropical. New information? It's kind of a shame that this is new information because this was published in the mid-1900s. Why is this new information? So even if you want to embrace the don't believe the newbie foreigner's reaction, you still must deal with the actual facts that indigenous Indians for dozens of centuries have been trying to challenge the popular sidereal tradition. Thus, the idea that Indian astrology should stop using the sidereal zodiac is in fact neither new nor foreign. Any questions? Thank you, Teresa. Let's see, where did we start? Okay, I think this is where we start. Do you read charts? Yes, just go to victorcara.com and you can get to my readings. Sam Dam is asking something unrelated, so let's stick with the content. Dasha, again, you're trying to ask other things that will come up. We'll do other streams on this. Here's something which is related from Sam. Please briefly explain what Ayanamshas are. Amsha means how much, or how much space. What is the size of the portion? Amsha literally means portion, right? But in usage, Ayanamsha means also a measure. An amsha means a measure of an arc. In usage, it actually means a portion or slice. But how big is the slice? Can also be meant by the word amsha. So what the term Ayanamsha means, how big is the slice till you get to the Ayana? The Ayana is the solstice. So what Ayanamsha is a measure. When you're starting at a star, how big is the arc to the Ayana, to the solstice? So for example, if you use Chitra Paksha Ayanamsha, you're saying how big is the angle between the Chitra Yogatara star and one of the Ayanas, or the equinoxes, Vishuvats. Because this way of measuring that I explained, where you take the equinoxes and the solstices, and you know where they are by measuring the duration of the days and the nights, and then you know where anything is by measuring its angle from the sun. That method, you cannot erase that. Even if you do sidereal astrology, you still use that method. If you use sidereal astrology, you just impose an Ayanamsha on top of it. So what the sidereal zodiac is doing actually is it's saying, look, we have this measure of the distance between a star and a solstice, which is an important measure because the solstices are very important because they form the basis of how we measure the year, which is actually the same as the zodiac. So we have this measure between the beginning of Aries or some other part, the beginning of Cancer, the beginning of Capricorn, the beginning of Libra. We have the measure of a distance between the star and that, and what we do is we apply it to the star and to this. That's incorrect. You just apply it to measure how far has the star moved from the Ayanamsha. So you can know. So for example, if you know that today the days and the nights are equal, okay, then I know. And yesterday was a little bit more day than night. And I'm in the northern hemisphere, then I know, okay, the sun is actually at 0 degrees Libra. And then I know that Venus is 20 degrees away from the sun. Forward from the sun, it's set a little bit before the sun. So I know that Venus is at 20 degrees Libra. Now I want to know Venus's stars. What stars are Venus close to? How will I do that? By the Ayanamsha. This is what the Ayanamsha is used for. This is what it's supposed to be used for. Why are there different ones? They're not very different. They're different within a very small degree of arc. Because it's not exactly clear what star is supposed to be used. But basically the Indian government decided, let's just use Lahiri. It's close enough. Lahiri is a very simple one. It says that star over there, Chitra Paksha, Chitra, which is, what's the Western name for it? I can't believe that. I'm forgetting that one. It's been too long. Anyway, that star over there, Chitra Yogatara, that's 100. That's supposed to be 180 degrees away. 180 is a very easy angle. It's supposed to be 180. It's supposed to be 0 degrees on the Vishuvat, on the equinox. So let's use that one. Other people say let's use a bright star in Cancer, or let's use a bright star at the end of Revati or something. You can do whatever you want. There's various ways of defining exactly what star to use and what the angle is and what speed the angle changes with. That's the subject for discussing Ayanamshas. So hopefully that answers your question. Sam. Catherine, how did the sidereal zodiac come to be used? Because first of all, why was the tropical zodiac not very much used in ancient times? In ancient times, whether you're in India or you're elsewhere, the records of the astrology from very ancient times do not talk about 12 zodiac signs. They talk about stars and nakshatras. Because in the very ancient times, the astrology relied on the observation. It's easier than knowing what day it is and how long was the day and night, and therefore where's the sun and what's the angle of this thing to the sun, and then what's the Ayanamsha to that star. Easier is to just look with your eye. The planet is near the star. And that's what people did in the very old days before they had worked out how to do it quickly and accurately on paper with math. But around 2000 or 2,500 years ago, they started getting good enough with the math that it would be fast and relatively accurate. And that's when they said, wow, now we can use these 12 zodiac signs, which are not visible, and the 12 houses, which are not visible. So that had an explosion about 2,000 plus years ago. Astrology shifted over to that very dramatically. Why then did that become sidereal? Because they would say, this is our math, but let's check and make sure it's true. The moon is supposed to be at the beginning of Libra. Is it? That star over there is supposed to be at the beginning of Libra too. So let's check and see if this is called Drik Siddhanta, where you verify, in Indian custom, we call it Drik Siddhanta. You verify your calculation by an observation. So they still use stars as the reference point to verify if their calculations were correct. Then, as far as the way that history is usually taught and told, then Hipparchus comes along and says, you know, guys, the stars are not keeping a constant relationship to the equinoxes for whatever reason. I don't know that he knew why, but he just observed that it wasn't the same as had been previously observed, the angle between the star and the equinox. And he said it's changed this much over this much time. So he was the first person in Western history to establish an Ayanamsha. It's in Indian history, the Surya Siddhanta itself says that the stars drift in reverse in relation to the equinoxes. Western scholars will say this must have been put in after the Greeks figured it out. But the traditional Indians will say, well, we knew about it first. But for whatever the reason was, after the Hipparchus said it loudly, or brought it back to people's attention, that you can't rely upon the stars to check your calculations. Your calculations have to be correct, or you have to be very careful about how you calculate the angle between the star and the equinox. At that point in time, which was roughly 2,000 years ago, people said, all right, then let's stop saying that this star is 0 degrees Libra. But a few people did, and it took a couple of centuries to get people out of the habit. And in India, they did not lose that habit, even though people like Varahamihira and Aryabhatta were saying, we have this bad habit. If you ask me why didn't India when the rest of the world basically did, after a while, it took a couple of centuries, but the rest of the world basically said, okay, we give up on doing everything by visual contact with the stars. We're going to just use it purely as what it is, the calculation of the Ayanamshas, the calculation of the zodiacs, calculations of the solstices and equinoxes. Why not India? My personal feeling about it is that because now India had these 27 nakshatras, the West imported that from India. Just like people tend to say, Western history tends to feel that India imported the 12 zodiacs from the Greeks, which is not true. But they were influenced by the explosion of zodiacal horoscopy. That explosion occurred in Babylonia and then came to India. But the concept of the 12-fold zodiac is indigenous to India as throughout all cultures. But just as Western scholars think that the 12-fold zodiac was imported into India, most Western scholars also agree that the 27 lunar mansions was imported from the East, at least, China and India. And it's from al-Biruni, the Persian astrologer who visited India and studied the Indian systems. They imported the 27 nakshatras via the lunar mansions into the Western astrology. And then they screwed that up by making it, just as India screwed up the zodiac by tying it to the sidereal nakshatras, the Western astrologers screwed up the nakshatras by tying it to the tropical zodiac. So all of humanity made the same mistake, just in opposite directions. But the Indians are coming from a system of relying on the nakshatras mostly and how the divisions of the zodiac and the zodiac itself aligned with the nakshatras when the beginning of Aries is used as the beginning of Ashvini was too compelling to them, and they developed many systems based on it. And the whole concept of nakshatra padas that is very prominent to this day, and it dominates most of the Indian astrological YouTube presentations. That whole thing was born of the sidereal zodiac, and so I believe it was the unwillingness to abandon that system. That's my personal opinion. Do people use the same techniques on both sidereal and tropical charts? You should use the techniques. The techniques should be derived from your theoretical basis. So they should work the best when the theoretical adaptation is uniform. In other words, they should work the best. The ancient techniques should work the best when the ancient system is used, which is tropical. This is why you have very confusing interpretations from siderealists. They're saying that Hitler should have an Aries Mars, which contradicts the basic technique that a planet in good dignity behaves well, doesn't cause problems. So the new techniques which evolve as a result of using the sidereal zodiac, will probably break if you go to use tropical. But the basic, fundamental, beautiful techniques of ancient astrology will work best in the tropical zodiac. Why is there a disagreement about nakshatra calculation in the tropical camp? Why not? People are allowed to disagree about things. Maybe because there's very few people in the tropical camp. I mean, if you're just considering that there's Victor Kara, Ernst Willem, and Ryan Kursak, then there's only 3 people. But if you take all these other people that I mentioned, G.V. Krishnaswamy and all the Dwarka Mutt into account, then there's not that much disagreement. It's just Ernst. And Ryan adopted Ernst's way of doing it, who feels that the nakshatra projection, the degrees for figuring nakshatras should be projected from the North Pole to the equator. Whereas most people say that the equator is irrelevant because the planets moving through the nakshatras don't move on the equator. They move on the ecliptic. So the calculation of degrees should be done from the North Pole to the ecliptic. This is why you get a difference between how Ernst and Ryan calculate nakshatras versus the way a person using a regular zodiac, a regular Ayanamsha would get it. Listlip says, would changing the zodiac be radical? Would it change all the dates of festivals? It would be radical. Of course it's radical. Why is there such a radical reaction to it? Because it's radical. Maybe that's why foreigners are better at promoting it than Indians, because Indians are not so radical. They are hesitant to be radical, but people like me, we thrive on radical things. Yes, it's radical. It's 23 degrees different. So in other words, like you have a Makar Sankranti, which is an important Vedic festival which persists in India to this day. In Makar Sankranti now it's celebrated in mid-January because they're measuring the sun going into sidereal Aries. But Makar Sankranti is when the sun begins to... The whole point of the celebration is that the sun has ceased to descend. And now it rises again back towards us. And hence we're going to get more of the health-giving and life-giving rays of the sun. That's why we're celebrating. And that happens when the sun is at the southern solstice, not on January 15th. Michael Reed too, I guess. I haven't heard much about Michael Reed. Alf, I grew up being told Western astrology are stolen books, misunderstood, and are being put through a trial and error thing. That's why it's off. Vedic texts are still intact. Sure. This is very true. Western astrology was decimated 2 or 3 times by different purges, basically coming from Christian crusades, anti-pagan crusades. So the Western tradition in astrology is decimated twice, at least twice, and then has to be reestablished and translated into new languages. Whereas by contrast, the Indian tradition is just constant. So look at the Indian books. I just read you 3. And that's the only thing that you get. There's I'm not keeping something out because it's contradictory. I've asked people to come forth and show me the thing which is contradictory to this for the last 4 years. So look at what the Indian texts say. They say, Bachakra Nabhava Vishivat Dvitiyam Samasutrikam, that the zodiac is a division based on the solstices and equinoxes. And then so I'll leave it at that for today. We did it a long time today. Maybe next time I get done with my work early and have time and energy, I'll do the next bits on this page, which would be, I'll explain to you the presentation that I gave at the United Astrology Conference in 2018. Or if you don't want to wait, just go to this page, victorcara.com/tropical. The link is in the description of the video. And then you can get my notes, PDF notes on the presentation. You can watch the video where I gave a presentation from the hotel room. That wasn't the live presentation that I gave. It was the one in the hotel room. This is from the year before COVID. Luckily, they got this United Astrology Conference in. Maybe the next one will also happen. So we could go over that. If you can't wait, you can just go and download it. Then there's also this original video that I did in 2012, which is on this page too. We'll go over that at some point, which has all this content in it. See all this stuff? Mula pin. Many people are suggesting that the zodiac comes from Babylon and that therefore it's constellational. The constellations of Babylon are not the 12 signs of the zodiac. They're the 18 sidereal divisions for the moon and the sun. The Egyptians, 30 divisions, 36 divisions, 36 constellations. So that's all there. Then we have this series also on this page after the modern Vedic astrology community flipped out on me. And then you had KRS and Sam launch this big anti-Victor Kara crusade. Then I put out these 9 parts, a 9-part presentation, taking apart what they were doing. That's also on this page if you want to see that. Then this friend of mine has this bit, evidence of traditional Indian use of the tropical zodiac with sidereal nakshatras from the Saptarishi Nadi. This guy discovered that in Saptarishi, the ancient records of ancient horoscopes is in Saptarishi Nadi, and many of those horoscopes have nakshatra Rashi correlations which do not match the concept of Aries and Ashwini being coexistent. So this would be a good article to read also. Also on this page you can get to this video about 24 Q&As about tropical Vedic astrology. There's a bunch of other facts, just random facts, FAQs. And then there's really old stuff here at the end. All right, guys. So I humbly request you to, if you are interested in this topic, do not write it off. It is not a small topic. It's not me being upset that people don't believe me. It's me trying to explain how to do astrology effectively in a manner which will be scientifically or systematically respectable in the long run. To do divination in general, you don't need to have a systematic or scientific system. You can use your intuition. Like Arjun Pai said in his post, he doesn't care if it's sidereal or tropical, he uses his intuition. Cool, that Intuition is intuition. Do that. Get your vibe, get your feeling, go with it, give your interpretation, be helpful. But to establish astrology as a respectable, systematic, usable, uniformly, regularly usable, not just usable by key individuals who have unusual psychic powers. To establish astrology in this way, it has to be sensible and consistent. And this is one thing which I would like to promote. Yeah. And I feel that I have valuable things to say, otherwise I wouldn't have started a YouTube channel. If I didn't feel like I had valuable things to say or worthwhile things to share with people, I wouldn't have started a YouTube channel. Therefore, why would anybody be like, why does Vic care about people talking bad about him? Because I'm trying to communicate with people. You know, if I did, I care because I'm trying to communicate. So I'll see you guys around soon. Thank you for joining me.